live. Like I said last time, this is not an effort to make any person that's vegan an ex-vegan. That's not my goal. That's not what I'm purposing to do. Although I think you should look into it, that's not my goal, right? The goal is to share experiences that myself and others are having, because I feel like there's a huge imbalance with those of us who experience issues on a vegan diet and those who promote a vegan diet who may be first, second, third, fourth year into it, all right? And they haven't really been in it long enough to be able to see the effects that it's having on their body. And two things. One, you do not need to be vegan to be healthy. And number two, you damn sure don't need to be vegan to be spiritual. And in fact, majority, actually all of the spiritual community, previous to religion starting to seep into things and all these things, the people were spiritual and they were eating meat. So I think that's really important to understand. And without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest. Please let us know your name and how long you were vegan.
So my name is Victor Valentine. I'm a creator of Valentine Media. You can hit the little handle in the bio. I was vegan I was vegetarian for 6 years, and I was vegan for 5 years out of that. So quite some time. I've been on animal products now for about 2 years. It took a year with just fish and eggs before I was able to go back to red meat. But even to this day, I still can't digest poultry very well at all. So any birds is like a no-go with my body, apparently. So
Okay. Well, and so you mentioned that you're in media. I don't always have entrepreneurs on here. However, when I do, I like to give them that platform. So can you let us know what you do as far as entrepreneur within your media?
So I run a media and marketing company focused primarily on mobile-focused content. So getting your ideas, your expertise, your curiosities out to people who are already looking for these subjects on their mobile phones, ensuring that they have a pleasant experience browsing through your story or your content, and really representing yourself in the best fashion possible.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, thank you so much. Like I said, I like to let people know, not just myself, but what my guests do, because I think it's very important. So, okay, let's get into it. So you said you were vegan for, you said 6 years?
Vegetarian total for 6 or 7 years, but I was vegan out of that for at least 4.
Okay, but you were purposing to restrict yourself from like meats and things like that, and more so just stay on the, like, I guess the butter, eggs, and cheese. Is that?
Oh no, while vegan, I wasn't eating none of that. So I wasn't eating any dairy products at all during my time as a vegan. But it began as sort of a digestive requirement. I thought that meat was kind of like blocking me up a bit. So I eventually, experimented with vegetarianism. I got really into, being extra healthy and detoxing and doing all these things.
What did you eat while vegetarian?
So I was focusing a lot on vegetables and like lots of salads, fruits, any things that I can really get my hands on that didn't involve animal products. I was a little lax as far as like if I was unaware that I was consuming animal products, I wasn't, upset to find out, oh, this had, lard in it in these beans or something or other, that you would typically go through as a vegan. So it was more of the dietary aspect until I eventually wrapped myself up in a little bit of a disorder when it came to being extra healthy for the sake of health's sake.
Okay, all right. And just for you guys that are watching, if you see me looking over, I'm just looking at my notes. I want to make sure that I ask the right questions so we can get the good juiciness from this. All right, so you said you were vegetarian for a total of 7 years, but you were vegan for 5 of those, correct?
Yes.
All right. And what made you go, what made you go vegetarian? I know you touched on it a little bit. What made you go vegetarian, and then what made you transition into being vegan?
So my venture into vegetarianism began out of curiosity to see whether or not my system would run better without meat. I've always been on the smaller side as a person, so my walking weight typically before going vegetarian is about 120, 125, and I'm 5'8", so I'm a rather thin guy. And then through my time in vegetarianism, I found, more and more people who aligned with my own views, and I got further, down the rabbit hole a bit. eventually leading me into, like making sure I was expelling all of mucus and making sure I wasn't eating anything that would form any sort of problem within my body. So then that really led me into veganism and going pure, without eating cheese or without eating butter or eggs or anything of that sort, fish. And through that, deeper down the rabbit hole I went over the next couple of years, and I eventually found my way into like the frugivores who are fasting for days on end off of like watermelon alone and breath work. And the further I got into this rabbit hole, I sort of found a resonance with the worldviews I was encountering. So that led me to believe I was on the right track internally, without really like checking in on myself and my own health.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's interesting that you say that, because it does play into your worldviews. Oftentimes, especially when you are, I'm not saying that you were just awakening to like spirituality or like synchronicities and things like that, but I know for myself, when I was starting to be like, oh, these synchronicities are like meaning something, it was like, oh, so I'm vegan now. And then I'm seeing things that correlate with that. And I'm just like, oh, this is the right path. You know what I mean? And it's not to say that I wasn't doing the right things, but you can easily start to, those things, those lines can bleed very easily with, what you're doing and what you're seeing synchronicity wise, because your mind will find what it needs to find in order to, you know what I mean, to confirm and validate what you're doing too. So that's interesting. And you said that you were vegetarian for a while, and then because you were purposing to not do the mucus thing. So where did you hear that mucus myth? So it kind of seems like you started to go vegan because of a lot of the vegan doctrines that that you may have adopted, or what?
Yeah, so I'm real big on Twitter. Like that's my primary network of choice, and Twitter is where all the weirdos live. So, and
Hey,
being that was who I was like seeking out, I was finding more of them,
okay.
and I liked everything else that they were talking about. So it's kind of like I just co-opted a lot of their own views as my own without really doing that research first. I had no real understanding of like macronutrients. I had no understanding of things like vitamin B not being produced in the body, or certain nutrients that come exclusively from animal products or are rather challenging to replace with vegan products. So it really was just the further I got into the dogma, the more I found it was kind of like the correlation is not causation thing. So it was like I was finding more people I resonate with. I was having more interesting conversations. I was finding, more connection with people. And that was leading me further and further into this sort of like cult mindset with my eating specifically, not necessarily like with other people or, with groups, but it was more along the lines of like, I'm doing this in order to really focus in on this one goal of being healthy. And all the while I'm sort of like deteriorating in front of my friends and family. It was getting thinner and thinner through those years, to the extent of dropping to about 105 pounds at my lowest. And I was having trouble even like staying conscious, sometimes. So I didn't, while even being vegan, I wasn't exactly following proper vegan even protocol. So I was still doing things like energy drinks to keep myself alert and awake through the day, or, relying on, and that, curious enough, there's usually B12s and other B vitamins and energy drinks and stuff. So I was finding ways to supplement unknowingly, but through those practices, I was also damaging, like other organs and feeling generally, worse and worse. But what was weird about it is like in my head, I felt great. So I felt great because I was doing this thing and I was sticking to it. And I was like, it was my first real act of like self-discipline as far as my body was concerned. So yeah, somebody's mentioning orthorexia. That is exactly what it developed into, where I was just very compulsive about what was going in, or how much was going in, or what specifically was, because I was doing things like mono meals pretty often. So like just eating, like 7 avocados and calling that dinner, or 12 oranges for lunch, or an entire watermelon through the day. And I'm like, well, I'm chewing the seeds and I'm swallowing the seeds. So, in my app where I'm tracking my nutrients, it says that I should be okay for protein intake, and not really making the connection that like most of that isn't absorbable through the body, or it's like, I was having enough evidence as it was that I was deteriorating, but in my head, I look like I do now, which is a walking weight of 140, and I'm like rather fit, for where I was. So in my head, I was like this super fit person. I was getting really cut in my head, but it was a lot of like bones and very minimal skeletal muscle and everything. But yeah.
Wow. It's interesting that you say that because I found myself doing the same thing. And I'm always like kind of like amazed in a way when I hear other people give their testimony because for the record, guys, I've never spoken to him about his story or anything like that. I only put out like a SOS signal and was like, if you want to tell your story, let me know and I'll bring you on. But I never spoke to him and I did it on purpose so that he would be able to give his story genuinely and I wouldn't know, just to see the correlations. And it's amazing because you mentioned, and I was going to ask you, how did you feel even though your body was deteriorating? And I felt the same way. I felt great. I mean, you know what I mean? Like I felt like I was doing good. And if you would ask me, I would have said I was doing great. I felt great. But there's these little moments where you're not feeling so great and you're looking for something to step in. You're looking for that thing, whether it's, the taste from the smoked paprika or the nutritional yeast or whatever. You're looking for something that gives you that meat flavor, or it just kind of like reminds you of what you used to have, even though you don't have it anymore. And so that's interesting. You said the body dysmorphia, basically, like you thought you looked how you do now, but you didn't.
Yeah. So what I come to discover was a lack of like fats and protein that was digestible in my diet was affecting my body to the extent of I like to summarize it like my brain was eating my body. So I was doing a lot of writing during that time, and I was like really working through some mental things that even to this day I've not completed like totally, but the level of foresight that I had at that point in time was so astounding to me. And I felt like because I had that capability, I was doing something correct. And that because I was solving all these problems, with my writing, I was working toward the goal when I was really just kind of like sitting in place and refusing to actually do the work other than being restrictive or other than being an aesthetic or, whatever it was at the time. It's a challenge for me to explain it now because I don't have that mindset anymore. But yeah, a lot of my time spent was, on Twitter talking with people who shared similar views and stuff. And I started to build an audience around just like having out there thoughts and kind of like being really like, I'm going to take this thought way over here and connect it to this, and I'm going to make it work, and reputation online. And as I transitioned into animal products, my first animal product was actually like, it was some sort of fish caught. I'm born and raised in Southern California, so that's where I was during my time of veganism. One of my friends had caught a fish in the local bay, and he was like, I caught this with my hands. I caught this like myself. And it'd be an honor if your first taste of fish since X was this. And I was like, okay, like I can work with that. And in my head, it wasn't so much like I'm doing this for the animals or I'm doing this for the environment. I think I eventually co-opted that view because I ended up parroting those talking points at some point. But when I had that bite of fish, the first thing I could that I realized was how tacky it was against like my teeth. And that was something I hadn't really experienced in several years up until that point. And I was just like kind of sitting there chewing it. And I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like want more. But, again, I mentioned I was at my lowest weight ever at that point. And I think it was sort of like that hand reaching out for you, like, hey, you need this. You don't know you need this, but just trust me and take a bite, sort of a thing.
Wow, that's amazing. There was something you said, it'll come back to me, but it's amazing that you say that because I felt the same exact way. Like, well, my first piece of meat that I ate that broke my vegan fast was actually cod fish, and it was amazing. I remember thinking like, what the fuck was I smoking? Because this shit is delicious. Like, hola prima, ¿cómo está? I literally remember thinking like, this is the most amazing. I just remember thinking that's the first thought I had is like, how did anybody convince me that this was terrible? This is amazing, But it's interesting you said that. Oh, that's what it was. You said that your friend caught the fish with his hands, and it was like an honor for you to break your vegan fast, so to speak, with that fish. And it's interesting because my brother, he's a hunter, and it was deer season around the time that I was feeling so terrible. At the time, he was in Florida, and it was deer season. He had hunted a deer, and man, it was like so crazy because everybody around me, we always do like this yearly thing where we all get together, and everybody was eating meat, and I just remember I was eating like bean burgers and stuff like that I would make. And I just remember thinking like, dang, that deer smells amazing. And I would have dreams about the deer, eating it, and even when I was vegan. And what allowed me to break my vegan fast after the cod was eating that deer. And I remember thinking like, I'm so thankful for that because it was an honor for me. It was his first deer. And I was just like, man, I almost missed that. And that's huge for me. You know what I mean? Like, because you're eating something that somebody properly hunted, bow and arrow style, and, prayed over that when it took the life. And, that whole spiritual aspect of the transference of life. You know what I mean?
Right.
When you're eating meat, and I think a lot of vegans, well, I know a lot of vegans miss that point. But so I did go through a little bit of your photos. I was looking for a photo to put on the flyer, and I was scrolling through. I was looking for the photo that you have on your on the little circle, the profile, but I
Hmm.
couldn't find it. So I was scrolling through, and I was just like, well, I think I saw you when you were like 110. And I was just like, whoa, like that is drastic. Like your transformation from that to what you like now is, whew, that thing is crazy. So I want to
Thank you.
ask you, like, what made you say, okay, it's veganism that's causing this, and I don't want to do this anymore?
So it's interesting because I didn't really come to the conclusion that this is what needed to change. I ended up moving away from Southern California late 2019, and I moved clear across the country to North Carolina, and I'm in Raleigh now. So, and I've been out here since. So, I kind of tackled multiple problems at the same time because it was an employment opportunity, and it was my first time living like out of state, and I kind of thought like there's added benefits of me being like on my own, completely like removed from most of the environment that started these problems to begin with, while also, adventuring out onto this new chapter of my life and meeting new people and sort of like exploring different aspects of business and things of that nature. So it was not so much a change of, I'm going to stop being vegan. It was more of a, hey, I'm hanging out with a whole different group of people and all of them are meat eaters and all of them are like huge guys and I'm not. And I'm getting like, rather picked. I'm getting picked on for being small. And I'm not like, I needed that stuff. I needed that kind of push to like, get out of the comfort zone that I'd created for myself within being as skinny as I was, or within being like underestimated visually or something. Whatever it was in my head that I was dealing with at that point in time, I knew that I was in the right place to break habits that had put me there. So
Wow, that's amazing because, like for me, it was definitely me being literally looked in the mirror on my way to wash my hair, and I was just like, "You're dying." Like I just felt that way. I don't, you have to be vegan for so long to understand, and I know you understand like when you started to come back to life. However, for those of you who've never been vegan, there is a point where it's just like your spirit just kind of like dies a little bit, and I don't really know how to describe it beyond the fact that you just know something is wrong but you don't know what it is. Something is not how it used to be but you don't know what it is. And I remember looking in the mirror before I went to go wash my hair, and just, I was loose natural at the time. I had curly hair, and I was just like, you're dying. And then I went to go wash my hair. So that's interesting for you that you were just saying your environment played a huge role, and I'm a huge promoter of you. We are products of our environment, whether that is good or bad in our mind. We are, though. Whether we choose to not be like our environment or whether we choose to resemble that, we still are products of our environment. And you being in that environment where you know, because my people are originally Geechee, so I'm from the Carolinas, so I know that it's thick people up there. It's muscular, you know, thick. It's not too many skinny people. So you being in that environment, you know, triggered you to be like something. You know, let me ask you, before you went vegan, were you, or vegetarian even, were you more like, were you thicker, were you bigger, or did you go vegan or vegetarian when you were younger to see that difference?
So I went vegetarian, I think I was around like 22, 21, and my walking weight was still 120. I was still rather thin. Like I didn't work out. I didn't have any level of fitness. The greatest level of fitness I had experienced up until that point was like marching band. So, not super fit by any means, but I just slowly started losing the little fat and muscle I did have, and I was kind of getting really sunken in the cheeks, was getting really sunken around the eyes, and I was like, my face was really thinning up right here, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, cheekbones are like on fleek because I look good, right? So,
Yeah.
but as I look back on those pictures now, like selfies and stuff I was taking at the time, and I can see the dead look in my eyes. Like I can see me upset with myself and not communicating it except through like looking at the camera. And looking back on all those photos now, I'm really just thinking like how I was so stubborn to not like hear myself call out like that. Like in every single picture I was taking of myself, I'm looking at me. It's like, yeah. So that was that was really the shift. And as soon as I started getting back onto the animal products, so I left California in November 2019. I had started working eggs back into my diet at that point, and
What made you
basically
pick eggs?
it was just the easiest thing to eat. Like it was easier than fish because it didn't have the texture, and I could make it several different ways. And there's like you can there's it's pretty versatile as a food. So that was my first choice, and pretty immediately, like within the next month, I'm, continuing to take selfies as I always do, and I'm getting more comments about how the life is returning back to my face, or you look so present, and you look happy, or you look there. And these are the same people that witnessed me go through the vegan phase, that watched me progress deeper into the orthorexia over like Twitter or over, my friends or family back home or wherever. So it's all these people were just reaffirming to me that what I was doing was correct. And even if it felt uncomfortable, even if it felt like challenging to, sit there and try to eat more than 2 or 3 eggs at a time or for more than one meal, I knew that I was on the right track. So eventually I worked my way into like fish products, and that became way easier after that because it was just like I would just bounce between, eggs in the morning for breakfast. I'd have my normal lunch of like a salad or whatever, and then tuna or salmon at the end of the day with some vegetables and stuff. So I was still, you know, using a lot of my palate that I had earned through my veganism and everything. I wasn't like avoiding vegetables outright completely. Um,
Yeah.
so I did that for the first like year, and then November of 2020, so now a year ago, I was in Austin, Texas, and we're at this big fancy dinner that a bunch of our friends and I had put on. And, I'm in Texas, so I'm like, let me have a steak. And I'm talking with the people at the table, and they're like, you're gonna order a steak? You're gonna order steak right now? I'm like, yeah, right now. Like, I'm gonna order a steak. And they're like, you have to get it like black and blue. You have to get it Pittsburgh style. And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but yeah, run it. So turns out that that steak is like charred on the outside and near raw on the inside. And that was like a lot for me to process mentally. So I start eating it, and it's amazing. Like the texture, the flavor, the juices, all of it. And I'm sitting there like befounded because growing up, I'd only really eaten steak like well done, or like hamburgers or something, or like street tacos and stuff. So the meat tends to be cooked like well done. Having it cooked that way, though, made me realize that the reason I didn't like beef to begin with, and maybe some of the original problems in my digestion, was the overcooking of the protein and the denaturing of the protein. Now it's becoming unusable because it was overcooked, or anything along those lines. So once I'd gotten to that point where I was like, wow, steak is actually pretty damn good. Um, Through that trip, I didn't have any stomach issues. Um, I didn't have any problems at all. Like it was fine. And I was like, okay, I guess this is like my next step. Like, let me move into eating red meat. And that's what I continued doing. and I've been that up until this point. I can eat pork, but I try not to eat too much of it. Um, but red meat is always great, and I soon found out that like my gut biome doesn't support poultry anymore. Like it immediately just like no go. So
Yeah.
which is pretty curious to me because I like love eggs and I still can't eat eggs, but it was just like so strange to me that I just couldn't eat chicken no matter where it was from or how it was prepared, or it could be the most organic, free range, grass
Yeah.
fed, whatever. Chickens don't eat grass, but yeah, you understand what I'm saying. Like
Yeah,
it was really
the
a shock
pasture
to
raised,
me.
all that.
Yeah, it was a shock to me to find out that like this was the way I needed to support my body. And
Yeah.
soon, and through that process of, discovering the foods that I needed to eat, I started to get more active as well. So I started to do like physical training and stuff. And I've been doing that now for well over a year. And when I first started, I had to really like come to terms with the lack of strength that I had cultivated in my body, and the lack of
Yeah.
control, and the lack of like autonomy, and where I was leading myself down that path of, becoming like thinking like, oh, I'm just gonna, relegate myself to a van, be nomadic, and go live out of a cave or something, and like never deal with society again. And just like kind of like get, as I got more comfortable with fitness and with everything else, the real curious part about that actually was I had earned a level of awareness within my body through the veganism and through the breath work and through the, fruit fasting and everything, to where I can feel my digestion still to this day. I can feel which muscles are activating versus which ones aren't. And that paired with the newfound strength and the newfound fitness and everything else kind of gave me a new outlet into um, my mom. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so that was kind of the entire move, and now I see myself like trying to hit like a certain amount of calories per day and even more proteins and fats and everything else because I want to continue to grow before my youth leaves me. So that's kind of the intent.
Wow, man. It's interesting when you were talking about the steak. It's like oftentimes, you hear it's so crazy though, because it's like when you're vegan, you have all these doctrines and all these dogmas you believe, but then when you are no longer vegan, it's like even the health advice that like is given out from majority of people, oh, don't eat red meat, oh, don't do this, oh, do that. It's like this is what is healing us. You know what I mean? Like this is what is bringing us back. This is what we are finding from for those of us who weren't eating meat for a very long time. This is what we're finding is actually bringing us back to life. So it's kind of like you're in this middle position where you're like, it's almost like everybody got it wrong. Like people who think they're healthy just because they're eating meat really aren't healthy because they're eating all these grains, they're eating all these seed oils and stuff like that. And then the vegans think that they're just, God's gift to earth. And it's like, no, you're wrong too, because we can't just survive. Well, you can survive, but you won't thrive on on just vegan, on just plants alone. You know what I mean? It takes red meat, it takes these things. And as a woman specifically, for those of us who have the ability to carry children, you really need red meat because I'm telling you, like when you're losing blood, okay, that iron is not the same. You need that heme iron. You only get that through animal foods. And so it's like I'm thankful that you came on because oftentimes you don't hear a lot of men give their perspective on how veganism affected their body. You know what I mean? And as a man, not saying every man needs to be like super bulky and strong or whatever, but as a man, you do want to feel like you can do what you need to do and you can take care and you can, you know what I mean? Like just provide and protect. And these are things that I think are pretty instinctual, for men. And it's just like when you're vegan, you kind of feel that wasting away more than you feel that I'm building up and I'm able to provide and protect the way I want to. And it's interesting you said like you more so want to like move away from society. And I was that same way. Like I was just like, oh, F people, like F the world, like I'm gonna just, disappear or whatever. And it's not being off grid. It's literally like I don't want to talk to nobody. Like everybody's on some crazy stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that was a lot to deal with at that point in time because it was like I was so avoidant of things like actual meat, but I would willingly eat things like the Impossible Burger and stuff, and would look at the ingredients, and I'm like, okay, pea protein, soybean oil, like a bunch of other shit, and I'm wondering, okay, how well does all this meld? And I'm thinking like meat is just proteins that have been like organized through an organism that, you know, survived and thrived on its own and everything else. So there's a level of reverence there when you eat animal products, and it's that disconnect of, you know, having that reverence for your food or knowing where it came from or hunting it yourself that has disconnected some of us to the extent of thinking that it's completely wrong and unnatural to ever eat an animal, even though you can't cite one indigenous tribe on earth at any point in time prior to 10,000 years ago that didn't eat meat or didn't eat some sort of animal product, because those things are absolutely necessary for coastal societies or for plain societies that are roaming and, you know, hunting buffalo, or that are, you know, whatever they happen to be eating for their staple of their culture is like, it definitely centered around animals, but it also centered around reverence, and it centered around understanding that, you know, overconsumption is a problem, and like keeping a level of balance between you and nature and everything else. So that's kind of like, that was the whole perspective shift with me was, and I got to give a big shout out to Grimhood on Twitter, because it was I found him through the communities that I was like involved with when it came to fasting and everything else. But this dude was literally healing himself of like epilepsy and stuff through specific animal products and through specific, you know, uses of certain macronutrients, micronutrients, different levels of, you know, blood testing, genetic testing, you know, your bloodline comes from and what staples of food they ate, and, you know, all these other things. And the more I thought about like where my family comes from or where my culture is, and I'm thinking, okay, they're always eating red meat, beans, rice, you know, tortillas, corn, like all this stuff, right? So I'd moved further and further away from that, and I'm thinking to myself like, no Central American culture survived just on plants. Like that's absolutely false. So once I had made that connection and kind of just like let go of that need to eat clean, I found myself feeling better, moving better, thinking better. Like everything just kind of improved in my life, and I was able to take on more. I was able to handle more pressure. I was able to handle more responsibility. I'm able to handle more just generally because I'm, you know, my body is running as close to optimal as I could get it at this point, which is far more optimal than it was when I was just vegan. So, yeah, it's been quite an experience, you know, moving away from dogmatic sort of, I'm going to restrict myself in all cases from these things, and into you know, let me explore a bit. Let me really listen to myself, and let me really listen to my body, and not use my own, you know, opinion of my self-image, or whatever I was like, whatever I'm dealing with personally tends to be reflected in how I see myself visually. So back in the time when I was vegan, you know, I thought I was a hot shit, right? I was like, you know, a gift to earth. So, you know, it didn't matter to me that I was starting to like lock in, and everything was wasting away. It was like, I was like, no, I'm over here being Jesus. Like, you know, that's kind of like the mindset that I had. And it's like really silly to say now, and I laugh at myself about it, but it was very serious. And there's a lot of people who, you know, checked me when I was trying to, you know, rattle on about how the brain doesn't need carbohydrates, and we need to avoid breads and pastas at all costs. And I have, you know, friends that study biochemistry that were still in school saying like, your brain absolutely needs carbs. Like, what are you doing? You cannot survive off sugar. You can't survive on just glucose. That's not good. You know, I remember one specific instance where I brought, you know, a 30-pound watermelon into work, and I was that guy that was bringing a 30-pound watermelon into work every day. And this is an office setting. This is like, I'll send you the picture afterwards so you can post that. But it's literally me like eating a half a watermelon at my desk. And at one point, you know, my kidneys hurt, and I could feel this pain in my back, and I was like, ugh. I was like, you know, I'm kind of feeling it, and I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'm detoxing. Like, that was kind of like the way I rationalize stuff. So, yeah, all that considered, is just like, it's pretty wild, the level of hypnosis that is required to, you know, ignore the very blatant signs of malnutrition, whether it be sunken eyes, darkened eyes, you know, slightly less, you know, no body fat, like less than 5% body fat. I'm going to say this for everybody watching. If you happen to be, you know, a relatively low BMI or relatively low body fat, you have no business fasting like that at all.
Yeah.
You don't, and
Dangerous.
you are going to eat into what little fat you do have, and then it's going to go for your muscles next, and before long, your heart's a muscle, so stuff like that,
Yes.
your heart will get. I have heart palpitations still to this day. I don't know where they're from. They could be from caffeine. They could be from different adventures through my life, or they could be through veganism, or maybe they're a combination of all three. But now I'm still dealing with those repercussions of, I have to be cognizant of how much caffeine I'm taking, or um, how my breathing patterns are, because even taking like a sudden breath inward sometimes will like cause my heart to just like jump in a weird way. And yeah, so that's just a little like word for the wise is really listen to your body and listen less to people who, can't do more than 5 push-ups, or can't support their weight, or can't, do anything other than sit and breathe. Like, and no offense to anybody who's like really on that tip and really good at it, because I know there are select few of us out here that only live on fruit juices and breathing and are in immaculate shape and are still athletic and are still, very capable. And if that happens to be you, then amazing. But if it isn't, and you see yourself waning away, and you're seeing like your bird chest, and you're seeing like all these different things develop in you that you shouldn't have the ability to see, really move forward from that and reflect a little bit more.
No, I mean, like you hit it on the nail. That whole explaining away, and this is the part that really it worries me now that I'm on the other side of it, is that this symptom, I want to say the symptoms, but the changes that happen when you go vegan, everybody assumes they're beneficial. Like nobody really thinks, oh, maybe that's an issue. It's always explained away. And the number one thing I used was I'm just detoxing. You know what I mean? I'm just detoxing, and eventually I'll gain my weight back, and I'm just getting rid of all these animal products and all these toxins out of my body, and in time I will gain it back, and I'll be bigger and I'll be fuller like I once was, and no problem. But that time never comes. And if it does, it's more so just like your body's defense mechanism, and you're just eating your muscle but gaining this fat. You know what I mean? And so it's just like I'm glad you said that, because oftentimes, and I say this all the time, people don't understand that the changes they're experiencing are not beneficial. And then if they are, how are you regulating that? Like, how are you measuring? What standard do you have to say the changes that I'm experiencing on a vegan diet are beneficial to me? Because most people, when they go vegan, they don't even know their standard. They don't even know what their body's doing already. Then they go vegan, and it's just like, oh, everything I'm experiencing is great. You know what I mean? And because you have this vegan rhetoric, this dogma, this doctrine, you're thinking that, oh, I am being vegan properly because now, you know what I mean? Like I don't have mucus, which is terrible. I don't have, I'm pooping extremely fast. You know what I'm saying? Like
Or multiple times per day, or it's not solid, or all these things that people go, it's like, yeah, as soon as you eat, you should be expelling it within 3 hours. And I'm thinking to myself,
yes.
like, if you're expelling it, you're not absorbing it, so there's something isn't working. Yeah, it's amazing to me how quickly you can fall into those traps, because I was like 21, 22 when I went originally, but I had no, like, I consider myself a rather intelligent person generally, but I didn't know anything about nutrition at that point. I didn't know anything about protein or fats or macronutrients or calorie intake or in or out or any of this stuff. And to just dive into a diet without understanding how it's going to affect the body, or even understanding or keeping track of like my baselines, that's a
Yes.
problem. Like I had hypertension, I had elevated heart rate most times. And I would work with breath work, and I would do yoga, and I would do all these things, and very consistently would mitigate the issues I was feeling within myself through other practices, rather than sitting and thinking, well, I'm vegan, so I might as well be doing yoga, and I might as well be meditating, and I might as well be doing breath work. It kind of just like leads you down this path where those, last three things are great and are great for you. But if you start from nothing, you can build with nothing. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like how I came to understand that I had an issue. And a lot of it was my own stubbornness and unwillingness to like budge for people and to change for the sake of your disapproval for the way I live. And that's kind of like the route that I took it. I'm like, you're not me. I'm not going to listen to you about my body image. I'm kind of like in my own head about all this stuff. And, everyone is just kind of like, you're a bag of bones. Like, I hug you and I don't feel anything. Like, you turn to the side and you disappear. And it's like, at the time, my hair is growing out again, but at the time my hair is very long, like past almost down to my waist. And I was hiding behind it. Like, I would intentionally keep it forward and in front of me because I didn't have neck. I didn't have shoulders. So it was just like, let me just wear this and be okay. And it's like, it was avoidance. At the end of the day, it was avoidance. And that's basically what I stopped doing, was avoiding the hard questions, avoiding the hard truths of, you're physically weak, you're undisciplined, you don't have a regiment, this doesn't count as one, like, do something productive. And part of it was my business partner now, he's a 6'2", 275 ex-NFL athlete who's always been, a massive dude and has always been like on point and very, up and up, and just working by his side for the last 2 years now, has instilled a lot of those disciplines within me. So now I see that, true strength isn't avoiding a situation or being neglectful of your responsibilities or anything, but facing them head on or facing them directly, or challenging yourself to take on more when you feel like you can't take anymore, or to do one more when you want to really stop, or get that last rep in, or just like, you're doing something like a press and you're like, you can feel your muscles wanting to, and you have the mental will, but it's just like physically not happening, and being okay with that limitation and being okay with the fact that this is where you have to begin, and this is where you have to grow, and this is where you have to start.
Yeah, that's so real. I'm so thankful for you saying that, because what happened when I was vegan was you said the regimen not being there, and then at first you start off and you are there, you're very present, you're working out, you're doing your thing, but then there's a time and I didn't recognize that it was nutritional deficiencies, but then there's a time when you start slacking and you no longer have the drive to go work out. You no longer have the drive to do anything really. You do just take that like avoidance type of thing. And then too, when people around you that love you are like, hey, you looking really different. You know what I mean? Like, you tend to have that, like, at least I know I did. My brother was telling me, my dad was telling me, my family was telling me, like, you look small. And I've never been a small person. So for them to say that was just like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I would always just dismiss it like, no, I'm finally figuring out like the perfect combination, you know what I mean, food wise, to get my body where it needs to be. And it was always that, like, I'm figuring out the perfect combination. And that was always my excuse. But really, like, I just wasn't motivated. I didn't have a drive. And the first thing I realized, especially when I ate red meat for the first time, it was the drive came back, like that ambition, that will to do, that will to just live on a different level. You know what I mean? Not just like survive, but like really thrive and be present in life. I didn't have that when I was vegan, and I didn't realize, you don't realize what you lose when you're vegan, because you're so caught up in the rhetoric, you're so caught up in the dogma, you're so caught up in, you know what I mean, like just being like, no, I'm right.
Yeah, that was and I can think back to the time of my life when I was vegan. Like, I was not doing much. Like, I was bouncing between warehouse jobs. I was still doing the marketing thing on the side, still trying to get that going off the ground, but I wasn't really making too much progress. Or when I was making progress, I was failing at certain projects and stuff, and then I was getting down on myself, and it was like all of these things were happening. But as soon as I, well, it was a multi-factored situation, but once I had got my nutrition on point, it was like, okay, I can wake up early and not need an energy drink first thing in the morning. Like, I'm waking up consistently. I'm having consistent energy throughout the day. I'm not experiencing random dips or, feeling the need to carry a pocket full of like tangerines with me because I need the glucose kick every hour since I can't keep myself awake. Like, there were really real troubling signs of nutritional deficiency that I was just completely and clearly ignoring. And now it's kind of like, I've done more in the last 2 years than I had done in the last 8. So, I'm really trying to make up for lost time here. And so I feel very similarly. And there was a moment, it was January 2020, so it was like before the lockdowns hit or whatever. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, I just feel cocky. Like I just feel more bold, and I'm like not really processing why. And one of my friends leaned into me. He's like, it's the testosterone. I'm like, oh, okay, this is testosterone. Like this is that kind of like willingness to put yourself out there and forward, and just kind of like be there, be as present as you can be as a man, right? Like putting that energy forward and really being like a force, So yeah, it was quite a change.
That's beautiful. I'm so thankful. I'm so happy because it's just like, it's just some people think I'm a troll, I'm an agent. I've heard it all. You know what I mean? I've had people comment on my YouTube channel. They're like, "Who sent you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Nobody sent me. I just I know what it was like, and I know what you're experiencing, and one of the biggest mind blows though for me was the fact that veganism was never, and it never started out originally as a health movement. It started out as simply an animal rights activist. Like people really were just like, I don't want animals to live a bad life and be slaughtered, and not only the slaughterhouse, but just in general. I don't want animals to die. And so people sacrificed themselves. It's a suffrage movement. And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, it creates martyrs, and one of the harsh realities of the world is that animals die. And if you want to argue that a cow that is raised by a farmer that lives a relatively comfortable life for what it would be presented in the wild, that can survive harsh winters or can survive hot summers, is due to human intervention. And most times, 9 times out of 10, the cow doesn't care what you want for it. It's a cow. It's going to do what a cow does. It's gonna walk around. It's gonna lay about. It's gonna do its thing, And no amount of your willingness to be this like martyr or be this like sacrificial lamb for the greater good matters. It doesn't. Like you are literally just excluding yourself from wherever you could have had an effect, wherever you could have had positive change or a positive, something that actually builds rather than just takes away. Like that's something I find pretty common with the more dogmatic vegans is like they are very minimalist, or they are very like do nothing, be nothing types. And I'm not saying this is like all of you or most of you or any of you. It was just rather common for me to interact with people who were like, yeah, I just kind of like kick it, or I just kind of do my thing. And it's just like very run of the mill rigmarole. And they're not really thinking beyond, what am I doing for the animals, or what am I doing for myself? It's like, what about your family? What about your future children, if you were to have any? What about your legacy? What about your impact on your community? What about your anything? Like, what about anything beyond you and this selfish innate desire to save the world, but to do nothing about it? And that's kind of the challenge I have to some of these people is like, if you were really serious, you would just fight the systems that exist and support the ones that do help, and go to farmers markets and support your local farmers, or not play into the machine that exists with mass production of cows or mass production of chickens or of eggs or of any of this other stuff, and really work toward being sustainable. Like it wasn't until I started eating animal products that I even considered, raising my own chickens or something, or, actually tending to another creature outside of my desire to just help them passively without actively being involved in any one direct animal's lives, and I feel like if vegans were actually serious, they would, raise their own animals. They would, you can build an emotional connection with an animal and understand that it can serve a purpose beyond, if it's going to die regardless, if it's going to die without your intervention anyway, and it dies of natural causes in your possession, well, you raise this cow until it was 14 or 15 and it was a part of your family, and then it passes and you have 300 pounds of meat that now can go into a freezer that you can keep for forever frozen, like basically, if you do it right. So That's kind of my mindset when it comes to this stuff, is like playing a passive role in the savior of animals or the saving of animals, but playing an active role in the destruction of unique crops to specific areas, monocropping, soil health, the environmental impact of shipping your bananas from halfway across the world when they're not ripe. So the environmental impact on that side, the path that it took to get to you, the path that it then from the boat to the store, like people aren't thinking about the greater chain of, oh, this packet of mandarin oranges I bought from Dole, where the oranges were produced in Thailand, it was packaged in Brazil, and then it was sold in the US. It had to travel how many thousands of miles before it got to you. That orange wasn't even ripe when it was picked. Like, I don't know. I just have so many issues, and it all connects. It's all a bigger play here. So if you really want to make a change, start local. Start small. Start here. Start where you are, rather than expelling yourself to, I'm going to save all the cows in America by not eating any.
Yeah. So you're not saving cows by doing that.
You're not. If anything, like, I don't know. It doesn't stop with you just don't feed into. You have to actively put your energy into things that will thrive or will grow or will support, localism. We have, and I say this a lot on most of, anytime I'm on a podcast, I find a way to work this in, but it's like, we live in a world now where we can be local globally. We can have globalized localism. Yeah. There's no reason why we need all these third-party manufacturing companies or sweatshops or whatever, when I can, if somebody in Nepal can set up a website and put their, hand-stitched garments on that website, why can't you just purchase directly from them? Why shouldn't you purchase your food directly from the farmer that lives nearby, or, anything of that sort? Because, not 2 generations ago, 3 maybe, your family knew exactly where all that stuff came from, and the only stuff available at the general store was like flour or like yeast or something, like stuff so you can get your ingredients going into the next products and everything else. We have this major disconnect with what it means to be involved in our food supply, what it means to be involved in the supply chain generally, and we have this consumerist culture that has been like embedded within everyone's heads, and it just so happens that veganism just suits that entire purpose. Oh, I'm gonna wear vegan leather. That's plastic. That's plastic, right? Yeah. Like, so stuff like that. Like, there are massive incongruencies with people who don't think their mindset all the way through. You're a vegetarian, you're an environmentalist, you care about the environment, you own a car. So it's like, you either go all the way or you don't go at all. Like, there's no halfway with this stuff. You kind of got to really think it through like that. And if you are already contributing to the greater problems, why not put that energy into some of the solutions that are happening near you? That's what I believe.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to get back on the oranges thing too. I just want to read these comments. I keep wanting to say dice because it looks like Spanish, but it's dice. Yes, I'm finally happy to work out. Omar says, we cannot remove ourselves from the circle of life. Only people living in industrial societies can even attempt to do that. And that's so true. Because it's like, personally, I understood that like veganism is a luxury. It's terrible for you, but it's a luxury modern type of lifestyle. You can't do that. When I went to Sierra Leone, West Africa, and people, like, the women looked at me like I was ridiculously out of my mind when I told them that I was vegan. Like, in the past, I wasn't vegan when I went, but thankfully. However, they were just like, they literally asked me, why did you starve yourself? And I was just like, damn, like, even y'all understand that I was starving myself, And here I was in a quote unquote third world country, and they even understood the nutritional value of meat, and Marquetta Valletta, who's another person I'll be interviewing, she speaks heavily on the fact that, eating meat was spiritual. That not only did they use the skin for drums, but also there was this transference of life that we were speaking about earlier. And to get onto the consumerism thing. Okay, so when I was vegan, I was a part of a company that I was a biomechanics trainer, and I also incorporated veganism because I was vegan. I didn't make my clients be vegan. I didn't have too many vegan clients, but the ones that wanted to be vegan, I was the one that came to. And so you know, the detoxes and the making of all the plant-based. I used to press black seed oil and all these things, you know. And it's just like the mindset of an entrepreneur is, let me find the most rarest, most, you know, amazing herb that exists that nobody else has, and let me make that into a product and then sell it. And what on the other side, what you come to realize is that, like, number one, that's terrible for the environment because if it's only produced in one country and you're purposing to make it this global thing like CMOS, then what you start to do is actually cause more problems because now everybody is wanting it, and it's just this consumerism. Nobody's thinking sustainability. They're just thinking, oh, this is going to help me run problems. Let me do that. Boom, 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 boom. Now everybody's doing it. And then the thing you said with the oranges, I did not realize there was a client that I had. She came to buy detox. A customer that I had. She came to buy detoxes from me, and she was like, "Oh no, I don't eat. I don't know how we got on this topic." She was like, "No, I don't eat cashews because have you heard about all the women that are losing their fingers just to uh plant and you know I guess unchuck the cashews or whatever?" And I'm like, no, I never knew about that. But see, we don't understand how, and even with like enslavement of not just Africans, but also like South Americans, like just our people, Latinos and Africans. And this is why this is so important, is because we often don't understand like how this affects us, because it takes a little bit more time sometimes for us to see the effects on us. And it's just like, she was just telling me, I'm like, these are cash crops that are causing harm to other people, because we don't see in other countries that people are being held at gunpoint to make these crops happen. We don't see that women and children are in slave shops producing these crops to give us stuff out of season. You know, we don't see these things. And like you said, that, you know, you're packaging everything in plastic just to send it across the world, where it's not even being produced in that proper season. You know, it's just like we don't see those effects. So it's like you're saving the animals, but you're killing your fellow man and woman, you know, and we don't see that. And then again, we don't even see that, yeah, okay, you're saving the animals, it's not on your plate, but animals died to bring you those foods. Because when you grow your own food, you understand that animals will come and try to eat your food. They don't care about you being all love and light. Like, they want the bell peppers, they want the carrots, they want the okra, they want the food. And how are you going to deter that animal? Because when it's for your survival, you're not thinking, oh, you can eat what you want, because animals run through food. You know what I mean? How are you going to deter that animal from eating? You're going to use some kind of natural pesticide or herbicide. And we have to understand that, like, even though it's plant-based, it's still poison hell. Like, heroin is poison. You know what I mean? Like, poppy seeds that have the morphine in it, like, it can be poison. Majority, if not all, the poisons come from plants. So it's just like we lose that, and we have that disconnect often, that happens when we think, like you said, it's martyrdom, and we don't see that until we're dying, until, like you said, and I said the same thing too. I was like, oh, my cheekbones, like, I'm out here, you know, looking super, like, oh, it's making me look younger, but really it's a deterioration. It's a degeneration back into what you think is youth, but it's really not youth. It's just you dying and suffering, like on some Auschwitz type stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, being, when you look at the photos for in the Holocaust, you see the bone, you start to see the same symptoms that you see in veganism, the extreme deterioration, the starvation, the you see the same things. And that's what I noticed in myself when I go back and look, and I'm like, damn, I didn't see it, you know. And it, man, I cried when I ate my first piece of salmon, because the red meat brought back the circulation in my body, but the salmon made my brain and my electrical system, it made me feel electric. And I just remember being like, wow, for 6 years, I was really starving myself, you know, and then influencing other people to starve themselves and then their children. You know what I mean? Like, I literally just cried because I was just like, dang, like, I didn't understand. I thought I was doing good, but I really wasn't. You know, I was really doing something dangerous.
Those omegas hit is what happened.
Yes. And
um,
those omegas are real.
yeah,
Before I was like, whatever, I can get it from walnuts, you know. But when you, and here's the thing, people who are vegan or who, who have been vegan, you understand. Well, if you are vegan, you don't understand. And this is what I mean. When you have been vegan for so long, at least over, I'm gonna say 4 years, because at the 4 year mark, you really start to feel like the brain issues, but you just kind of like write it off. But when you are past the 4 year mark, and you eat meat again, you can fully appreciate the omegas. You can fully appreciate the animal foods like that, because it just like pours into you and fills up gaps, and you think you're getting omegas from walnuts. You say that and you research that and you think you are. But when you eat that salmon, when you eat that meat for the first time, it's like I wasn't feeling like this eating walnuts.
right,
You know what I mean?
right. Yeah, that's really the part of it too. Is just like it's a newfound level of reverence that you have when you go back to animal products, because you realize just how little you had prior to it. And it
Yeah.
takes it takes half a decade of starvation for you to be like, well, when you do end up trying it, if you do end up trying it again, to really appreciate, wow, I could have stayed where I was and maybe adjusted a couple of things. Like I'm still on, like vegan protein. I can't do whey still. So can't do whey, can't do poultry. And I estimate that it's like, when you're breastfed at birth, you inherit cultures from your mother, and you inherit, her digestion basically. And when you like nuke your gut, flora, with nothing but plants or nothing but juices or nothing but whatever it may be, maybe there's other types of bacteria now growing that are not probiotics, that are the opposite, that are, that are taking the nutrients before it even hits your small intestine. Like as soon as it hits the stomach, it's not even going to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like it's a whole thing. And when you get back to eating animal products and you get back to sort of like understanding the food, understanding what is happening when you take a bit of meat and you're chewing on it and you're kind of like reflecting on where this is going within your body and how this is going to, affect me later and all these other things. It helps to move past the dogma. It helps to move past all the shame that you inflict on yourself for even considering animal products. And that's really the mechanism of veganism too, is shame. Is,
Yeah.
you're not, and we mentioned this right at the top of the entire stream, that you're not as spiritual if you consume life. And that's that's consumerist spirituality in a nutshell. It's like, and again, if it works for you, and you're if it works for you, I challenge you to like get a blood test, or get
Yeah.
do anything to verify that it's working for you, and
Yes.
reflect on the hard data, reflect on what is missing, because chances are you're not getting your omega 3s or your omega 6s or your B12s or your B6 or your, whatever else you might be deficient in. It might be a lack of other micronutrients, where your bones feel like are weaker. I suffered a break when I was a vegan that didn't heal very well, because I wasn't eating any collagen or anything. So
Yeah.
it's a lot to consider. Like, you're really weighing your future against your present feel good moment, and consider it. And I mean, like, again, if it works for you and you find yourself healthy and you find yourself athletic, or not really pressed one way or another about it, then more power to you. And I hope it continues for you as it always has. But it's something to consider if you've been feeling weaker, if you have to rely on constantly eating sugar or fruits to stay awake or to make it through the day, or you know we realize this when we go back on the meat products. I'll eat a steak and I'm satiated for 3 or 4 hours consistently,
Yes, sir.
and I have very consistent energy through that. Whereas if I woke up for breakfast and I made my patented smoothie that I'd make, where 2,000 calories crammed with peanut butter, nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, coconut milk, and all these other things. I'm eating like this really thick gray paste that I've made for myself, and I topped it with mangoes and all these other nice things. So I enjoy it, but you're sitting there eating all of this, and it's like, you feel good for what? Maybe you're full for maybe 30 to 40 minutes, and then
Yes.
you feel okay for maybe another 30 minutes after that, and then before long it's like, you've already gone through the energy that food has to offer you before it leaves your stomach, and that's kind of a problem when you are, a human. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, and it's so guys, just so you understand, I'm not making this up. I literally gave the same time frame. Like I would eat, I mean, a huge plate of food, and 30 to 45 minutes later, I'm like, I need to eat again, like, because I'm not satiated. And I used to be like, oh man, I eat more than you as a vegan, you know what I mean? And I didn't understand, yeah, it's because you're not getting satiation, you're not getting proper nutrients, you're not getting any good fats, you're not getting. And the thing is like, you can look at chronometer, you can look at all those little things and tag your protein and stuff like that, but it's the absorption that is the issue. It's not the fact that the protein and the fats aren't present. And that's what we see when we see these memes and it's comparing steak to broccoli, you know what I mean? And it's just like, broccoli has 22 grams of protein, you know what I mean? And so does steak, or it doesn't have as much. And you're like, it's not about the presence of the thing. It's about whether and how easily it's able to be absorbed into your body and utilized by your body. And the reality is that we don't break down, we don't have 4 compartments in our stomach to break down the cellulose and for the bacteria to turn that into something we can use. We literally just use it to bulk up stool and pass through, and that's it. Whereas the animal protein, we're able to absorb it a lot more, and you feel the difference. And this is the thing that I stress so much, is that when you're vegan, you just assume, but when you're not vegan again, you realize that, oh my gosh, like I would eat some meat in the morning. I would have like maybe 2 eggs and maybe some beef bacon or whatever. And it's just like, I wouldn't be hungry for 3 to 4 hours. And I'm just like, I'm used to eating 30 to 45 minutes later because I was vegan. That was one of the things that really just like blew my mind, is I was like, oh man, I don't have to eat again for a minute. Like I can actually focus on work now.
Right.
You know, I can do something beyond eating and then thinking about my next meal while I'm eating. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
kind
want
of.
to ask.
Go for it.
Go ahead.
No,
No, please go ahead.
I
Because I
didn't.
was
I
gonna
don't
ask
even
you.
remember what I was going to say, so don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I wanted to. So you gave us a little bit of like how you felt when you first started eating meat again, but I just wanna hit that one more time. Like when you ate the steak, not the fish, but when you ate the steak again, like what did your body feel like? What, if anything, what was on your mind? What were you experiencing?
So we were at like a rather high-end restaurant, and this steak was one of the most expensive steaks I've eaten, even to this day. So it was like, I don't remember what the cut was or anything like that, but I sat there and looked at it, and I took a picture before I, bit into it and everything. And I took that first bite, and like within 2 or 3 chews, I had just kind of like melted in my chair a little bit. Like I just like it felt like returning to a place that I had never or hadn't had been in so long that I just forgot was there. And I'm sitting there enjoying the steak, and all of these people that are surrounding me, and it was like a long table, and we're sitting on the one end of the table, so it's like a group of 4 or 5 of us, and they're all like eager, like, so what did it taste like? What is it good? Like, do you like it? And I'm just like sitting there like working it through, and I'm like, yeah, this is really great. This is amazing. And all they had done to it was salt and pepper. Like there was enough flavor in itself to just like be rewarding for the experience. So when I had ate that, I was very worried about like whether or not it was going to digest, or whether or not I was going to have like stomach pains through the night, because there was a moment when I was first vegetarian and vegan, or vegetarian at first. I was like 2 years in, and I ended up visiting a family member who had made, beef and beans. And they didn't tell me that the beef was in the beans, but I'd eaten like a lot of the beans because it was like I was hungry or something. And that night and through the next day, I profusely expelled everything out of my stomach for 12 hours straight. I couldn't even hold the water down at that point. And I'm sitting there, experiencing this like as an affirmation, like, okay, I'm ready to let go of meat forever. I'm ready to never return. And I hadn't accepted that in myself. And that was the turning point. Because up until then, it was kind of like, you know, I'm doing this because I'm exploring something new, and I'm doing this because I'm trying something for my health. And then when it came to the point of no return, I was like, okay, I'm in. And that's where the dogma started. That's where the, let me find more restrictive diets. Then let me find, well, what else can I cut out? Like, can I eat nothing? Like, I really wanted to know the answers to these questions, and it led me down some rabbit holes that, you know, I ended up, you know, experimenting with and stuff. And um, all I can say is, you know, leave a line for yourself to find your way back, because you may need to at some point. And yeah, I mean, like that's really all I have to say about that. So yeah, the steak was like a life-changing moment for me, and it was in front of people who, you know, were also bigger and stronger than me, and everyone's kind of like looking with approval. So there was like there was a social aspect to it too, where I was like happy that I didn't have to feel ashamed for enjoying this, because for so long I had put myself into a state of mind where it wasn't allowed, or it couldn't have never been allowed. So yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I ate codfish the first night, and then I was like super paranoid, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have dreams about the fish like dying and stuff like that, because you know that's what you're told. And then I didn't. I slept. It was amazing, you know. And then I woke up and I had so much energy, and then I had like quail eggs or whatever that day. And I remember that morning, and I remember thinking to myself, like, eating it and feeling guilty and just being like, I am really going to have to work at the relationship that I have with my food again, because I need this. I feel the difference. I feel my body accepting it. It literally was like my body was like, finally, we've sent you dreams. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've been screaming at you this whole time, and now you're, yes, you know. And I felt that, but at the same time in my mind, I was just like, but I'm eating animals, you know. And it's just like, in a way, like, I'm not thinking, well, when you take that plant food, like, plants can feel, and just because it doesn't have a central nervous system doesn't mean they're not sentient. They still can feel, and you're still destroying, you're still eating death when you eat plants. If you want to think of animals as death, because they're dying literally, like, in order to give you life. Like, everything must, there is that sacrifice no matter whether you eat plants and animals, and you just have to understand that. And so, like, I remember thinking that I'm going to have to heal myself with my food and my relationship with my food and everything. And so I feel you. I feel you on that. And that was one of the reasons why I stopped eating meat. The last piece of meat I ate was lamb. It wasn't for the animals, because I love lamb. It was just more so about health and the whole spiritual connection and that type of thing. So I want to know, like, what do you eat now? I know you touched on it, but like, what do you eat now? And actually, first, what psychologically, what allowed you to get over that guilt and that shame with eating meat again? First.
Accepting that I had been wrong, accepting that I had miscalculated for the umpteenth time in my life, and that my hubris was at play, and, you know, just accepting that I had made a mistake, and that on my path to, you know, building myself back up from where I was, I knew that it was something I needed to do, and I was there to do it, and there was no turning back again. So, and you know, to speak to that end, before I even got back on the red meat, I gained 25 pounds that first year, just eating normally, eating 3 square meals a day, nothing too crazy. Like, you know, I was really relying on eggs. I was relying on yogurt, even though it didn't really like agree with me yet. I was eating lots of fish, and just constantly trying to consume those products and everything. I was still eating, you know, like vegetables and fruits and stuff pretty regularly, and I still do to this day. I'm kind of leaning away from vegetables so much, and I'm kind of like, mainly because I want to see what my body how it'll run, not really like on a ketogenic diet or on a carnivore diet, but more leaning on the animal products and more leaning on those, and then relying on, you know, like frozen fruits, or, you know, vegan proteins, or, you know, these other, I'm ingesting other vegan products for the sake of trying to grow now. So then that's part of it too, is like your stomach shrinks, and you're unable to eat as much as you once were, and it takes a lot to like get back to a place where you feel like not only you're satiated but are growing, because that's my goal still, is, you know, just to grow. And to this day I'm having issues like my trainer's like, you gotta, you eat, and then within 2 hours you need to have that protein shake. And I'm like, dude, I'm still full. Like, I'm still
Facts.
working on it.
What
Like, I
are you
can't.
talking about?
I'm trying, like, I'm trying to work that fourth and fifth, meal into the day and everything. And it's like, that's the biggest challenge for me now. And again, I feel like that's going to be my next cap is like, okay, well, for a long time it was how low can I get the floor? But now it's like, okay, how high is the ceiling? So that's, that's really, it. And after I gained that 25 pounds, and I was like, really feeling myself after that because I started to look better. I
Yeah.
started to fill clothes out more. I started to like get compliments on, how I was built and everything. And I'm like, okay, I got to keep going. Like I got to keep going. Like I want to see where I can take it because I had taken it to such an extreme on one side. I wanted to lean it the other way. And it's not really like I'm doing best to not develop, another eating disorder the other way, like not being hyper, aware of every single calorie and every single gram of protein and what's digesting and what isn't, and calculating like all these other things. I'm just really trying to feel what feels right and really respect myself that way rather than force myself into a hole of you got to be ketogenic or you got to be carnivore, you've got to be vegetarian, you've got to be vegan. Like none of that shit, none of that matters. You just got to focus on what works for you and continue moving with that intent and with that energy, because before long you're going to find that maybe you had it wrong prior, or maybe you had it misguided, or maybe you had it, maybe you were just a little ignorant of what you were missing. And that's really what it comes down to. It's just like, if you've learned all you can learn about veganism and about like alkaline diets and breatharianism and frugivore and, all this other stuff, go the other way. Research
Yeah.
animal products, research, inflammation being reduced due to carnivore, research people who survive on raw meat, because that's also possible. Like there's people get out there with all kinds of stuff, and just like really think about your culture, think about your lineage, think about where you're from and what are the staples of those peoples in those areas, because that's really where you got to begin, is with your genetics and everything, because no one on this earth is genetically inclined to be vegan.
Nobody.
None of us. Like,
It's not gonna happen. And my best friend Karen, she forages as well. So she's out there getting things in nature. And what I realized too was that first off, agriculture is. And I took anthropology. Anthropology class in I took an anthropology class in college, and you're taught that agriculture is relatively new in the human history. And before that, you were gathering fruits and vegetables or whatever was in season. And it's just like when you think about that, like so with this whole COVID thing, if everything were to shut down and there were no supermarkets, you would not be vegan. It would be impossible for you to be vegan because number one, you're not going to soak your beans and sprout them because it's going to take time and you're going to be hungry. Number two, things are not in season all the time. Number three, you're not going to be able to find the abundance of fruits and vegetables that you think you're going to be able to find. They're not there. Oftentimes they're made by men, and it's not going to happen. You're going to find yourself looking at some animal and thinking to yourself, how can I take you out? Like that is just what's going to happen. And so I'm thankful that you said that because it's so important. Someone's live from Living Groom pod says, admitting we're wrong is so hard, especially when we were extremely passionate about an older lifestyle, respect. Yeah. And that's true. And I asked you that because that's one of the things that, again, we all have to come to terms with is what do we do? How do you get past the psychological block of I have to eat meat to live now. You know what I mean? It's not the other way around. It's actually the way I didn't want to admit. So what do you eat now? You touched on it a little bit, but like, what do you eat now, and what are the differences that you feel in your health and your body?
so my staples are still, fish and eggs are pretty regular, but I lean pretty heavily on red meats. Usually like
Okay.
2 to 3 meals out of my day will have beef in it. I no longer cook with like seed oils. I try to use ghee whenever possible, or just like Irish butter, or things that are a little more on the cleaner side of butter, not margarine or anything like that. Um, I like I mentioned earlier, I do vegan protein for shakes and everything, so I use a lot of like frozen blueberries and stuff, and I kind of go bananas. I eat a lot of bananas, and I know like some of these are like hybrids and stuff, and you hear about them, but like,
Hold on now.
yeah, it's kind of like I I still I utilize some of those tactics I picked up when I was vegan to sort of propel myself forward. So, having an ability to consume an entire blender of a smoothie is kind of a skill. So, like if I'm going to make a huge protein shake and pound the whole thing in one go, cool. Okay. I can do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, um, that's really it. It's just a lot of red meats, a lot of frozen like fish. Um, I tend to make like a side of a vegetable and then a side of fruit with my meals now. So I still incorporate, all of it when it comes to what I consider a balanced meal would be, 70% the protein and then 30% of a carb or of a vegetable of some sort. And then for, dessert or to top it off, maybe like some citrus fruit or something that'll kind of aid the digestion process. That's high acidity.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the process I've been, and I'm still finding the balance between how much protein is too much, keeping my water intake proper because that's still massively important, um, and really just avoiding as much as possible like the seed oils and some of the more like I don't really mess with soy anymore like at all, so I kind of avoid that completely. So that I do have some aversions now, but it's like mostly whole foods. I try to eat at like restaurants that prepare the food in front of you and stuff. So yeah, that's basically the staple. And I eat out a lot, but it tends to be leaning on if I'm going to eat out, it's going to be something that's heavily meat based. I'm going to avoid unnecessary fried carbs, and I'm going to kind of like, run with that. So
What are some of the differences that you've noticed in your health in your body?
my sleep changed dramatically first, and that was kind of like the biggest thing for me because I was a night owl for a long time, so I would just be awake until maybe like 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I'd fall asleep until like 10, and then kind of awake for the day. I used to sleep only 5 or 6 hours when I was vegan pretty consistently for years, so I was, you know, I've accumulated, I've racked up enough sleep debt for the rest of my life. Like I'm never going to catch up on that sleep. I'm totally okay with it, but
Yeah.
the sleep was the first thing to change, and then the second thing to change was just like your passive strength, like things you don't notice until you start to earn it back. Like I'm carrying my laundry basket downstairs and I can support it with one hand over my shoulder, not having it pressed, just kind of like holding it there.
Mm-hmm.
That's major for me because before it'd be like I'm holding it like this, I'm having to like really work myself to support this weight and everything. So that was the second major change, just like my physical ability, and then my third sort of change was kind of like my physical and mental resolve and my endurance and my willingness to push past my perceived limits and stuff. Because I thought I was doing that with the really restrictive diets. I thought I was doing that with the really regimented lifestyle, and moving into the other direction of a regiment where you're actively trying to build yourself up, or you're trying to push yourself further into new enterprises or into new businesses or into new projects or whatever sparks your interest.
Yeah.
You're going to need that energy to do those things. Like
Yeah.
you're going to have a lot of hobbies that you maybe just haven't like touched in a long time. Like I played music for half my life, and the last couple of years I stopped playing music, and I just kind of didn't have a problem with it. I was just like, okay, I played trombone for 10 years, but I'll stop. Like,
Yeah.
and then as soon as I got back, like, only this year have I gotten to a place where I've finally found the regiment that works for my body. I found the habits that work for my, my job and my work, my career. And then again for my hobbies and my passions. And then once more for the things I want to learn and the things I'm still, willing to explore. So, all of that plays a part in how you keep yourself going. Like where do you find your strength? Do you find your strength in being restricted from things? Well, maybe restrict yourself in other ways and build other disciplines. Like I know a lot of vegans who were alcoholics, or that's like into psychedelics really heavily and always doing those, and it's like always finding an escape of some sort. And it's like that's really what it comes down to is we pick our poisons, but pick them carefully.
Thanks. I agree. It's interesting that you say though that you started to get back to yourself, and I experienced the same thing. It's things that I let go. I didn't even realize I let go. Even just appearing online and just like taking pictures and going out, like simple stuff like that. I didn't realize that I let those things go, and really I did because I was like, I don't want people to know me or remember me like this, because I knew that I wasn't where I really wanted to be. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, I don't want people to remember me as this skinny, big head woman. Like, I want, I want people to know me as how I am. And so it just really made me subconscious and not do things. And, whether it be music or just being myself, expressing myself. Like, I didn't do that either. And so, I mean, for anybody listening, like, there cannot be these many similarities and we don't even know each other. The only thing we have in common is the fact that we were both vegan, you know what I mean, and restricted our diets extremely. And the fact that we're saying the same things and we have the same storyline is pretty significant, you know what I mean? So please, like, don't just pass that by. I do want to ask though, like, my last question is, what would you like to say to other people who are vegan and experiencing issues in the vegan diet?
Chances are, if you're walking the path, you're also walking other parallel paths. So maybe you're very reflectant upon yourself. Maybe you're very willing to let go of, trauma or of habits or of things that are no longer serving you. When you look in that mirror, make sure you're not also just dismissing the things that you don't want to see in yourself. Make sure that, if more bones are showing in your body than are necessary for a healthy human, think about that. Think about, you shouldn't have a bird cage in the middle of your chest. You shouldn't have super, thick ribs underneath here. You should fill out your shirt to some degree. If you're wearing smalls and they're baggy, if the clothes that you've had for 5 or 6 years even still don't fit, or they're just getting continuously, more loose, like, think about what it is you're really avoiding through those practices, because it is in itself a form of escapism, and it's a lack of self accountability, and it's a lack of really listening to yourself beyond the superficial. Oh, I feel good because I'm doing a thing that I know I'm having this positive effect on the world, so I'm a positive person, and I am, all these other things. Like, really think about that. Really think about lack of strength or lack of endurance or lack of, if the world went to shit tomorrow and you needed to carry a 20-pound backpack of your prized things you need to survive, and you can't go beyond a half mile with that on your back, consider that. Humans have always been prepared for catastrophe, as far as at least being able to run, being able to out like that. That was really where humans excel beyond any other animal on earth, is their ability to run. If you can't run, if you've never been a runner, I understand that. I'm not a runner. I'm not much of an endurance runner, even still, but humans as a species are runners. We always have been. And, there was nothing more terrifying in nature to these animals than being chased by this little thing, a group of them, and, you run and you run and you run and you get to the horizon and you make it and you sleep. And the next day comes, and on the horizon again, here come these little dudes. Oh damn, let's run it, let's go. Like, let's keep running, and you sleep again, and the next day passes, and again on the horizon, these damn animals are chasing me still. Like, think about the way we used to outrun buffalo or any land-based animal. We can outrun all of them. And that was the way that we all survived. So you use that as a metric, and we don't let modernity lull you into this false sense of security. Because as we all have witnessed in the last year, the supply chain is very fragile. The way that we have built this, and I say we as a collective, not really as us individually, the way this world has been built by us is rigid. And the only way it's going to stay rigid is if the people within them are easily boxed into these things. Like, if they can keep themselves siloed, if they can keep themselves from exploring new options, or if they can keep themselves from being extremely physically capable, you're not a threat. And that's the ultimate goal of control, is to have a reduced number of threats. And there are, by my count, 8.2 billion threats to maybe 10,000 of us on Earth that are running things around here, right? So keep that in mind. It's a numbers game, and there's been a lot of development. I work in marketing, and there's a lot of developments in propaganda and in mind control and subconscious control and culture science and all, or like uh, all social sciences and things that, you know, we are learning very rapidly what the human brain can do when persuaded the correct way. And
Right.
each of us, and I know everyone listening here is kind of like hit to the spirituality thing, we're all staring at black mirrors every day that are projecting our fears, our insecurities, our goals, our lives, our searches, our all of this is kept somewhere and is being used against you. So really think about how you're being led through these mediums. Really think about if it was just by chance you got a related profile and you clicked on it and suddenly everything on that page you happen to resonate with. Like there are traps out here for that, for people like that, for people like us that are willing to explore new options and new ideas and new everything else. So keep a keen eye to losing your own mind to these things.
Mm. I totally agree with you. That's how we all got sucked in for the most part, from what I'm finding. You know what I mean? We think it's by chance, but really it's not. It's programmed, and that's the thing I realized when I came from veganism. I was like, man, I was so weak, and I was just like, whoa, because when you look in the media today, what is everybody promoting? Plant based, plant based, plant based, plant based. It's everywhere now. And those of us who have been through it and we, are on the other side now, it's just like you can look back and be like, whoa, if we never went through that, we might be influenced by, oh, be plant-based now. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, no, we're not now, because at the time when we went plant-based or vegan, it was like, it wasn't as popular. It wasn't new, but it wasn't as popular as it is today. You know what I mean? And so now it's just like everybody is coming at me like, oh, now people drinking almond milk, oat milk, and all this stuff. And you just like, wow, because now I'm looking at all this stuff I used to do, and I'm just like, that is so harmful. It's so detrimental in so many different ways, not only just the ecosystem, but your health, you know? And, a lot of people don't see that now, but we do. And so this is why these talks are so important, is because it really is like a Batman signal in the sky. Like, guys, we really need to reevaluate what we're doing, because like we said in the beginning, you don't need to be vegan to be spiritual, and you damn sure don't need to be vegan to be healthy. It's a lot of things that we were eating, the wheats, the seed oils, you know what I mean? Like even now, like when I eat fruits and vegetables, fruits more so, but I mean vegetables more so, they're fermented. And they're cooked. I don't really mess with too many raw vegetables anymore. More so because I still have like a little PTSD from being vegan, and I just had really I couldn't even digest vegetables for a long time. I really had to just more so focus on meats when I first started to eat meat again, because my digestion just wouldn't allow for it. But I mostly do cooked vegetables and fermented vegetables now if I'm going to eat that, and it's just like you really see the difference. So I'm really thankful for you coming on and giving your story, because we need that. And even the slightest bit of differences that we still have commonalities, and people need to hear that, because your story is so many other people's story, and they're ignoring the signs. And that's what I find oftentimes in vegans, is that they're just simply ignoring the signs. They're commenting and trolling on my shit, but they're ignoring the signs. And when you go to their profiles, they're looking like how we used to look. And it's
Yeah.
just like, there's no way you are experiencing what you think you are when you looking like you looking. So I just know, you know.
Yeah. I'll leave you with this last thought is like the most glaring contradiction to like plant based is the fact that all meat is plant based at the end of it. Most meat.
Facts.
Well, except for the meat that eats other meat, but even
Yeah.
the meat that it eats probably ate plants anyway. So
Yeah.
it's still part of that same chain. They're just kind of cutting you off from a major source of what really is needed to run your body and stuff. So just think about that.
Yeah. I agree. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and for coming on. This video will be saved on my IG, and I'll put it on YouTube just so everybody can see it, and I'll send you a link and everything like that. But I want everybody to be able to get this information. Before we leave, again, I know you're an entrepreneur, I know you're a business owner, so please let everybody know where they can find you, what you do, and where they can find you.
So, Victor Valentine, I'm a marketer. I build websites, I do a lot of writing, and I build systems for content distribution. So, you can find me at Subtle Bodhi. The name that I have here is the name I have on all networks. If you want to follow my business page, that's Valentine Media, at the Valentine Media on Instagram, or valentine.media as the website, and you can find all my links there. Link in the bio and stuff and everything else. So yeah, hit me up.
Okay, bet. All right. I appreciate you so much, Victor, and you have a wonderful day. Like I said, I'll send you the links and everything, guys. This will be saved, so please make sure you share it because you might be saving a life. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Janelle.
Yes.